Hey everyone, this is Tyler here. Hope everyone has had a happy new year so far. I know that things are already getting crazy, 6 days in, but we'll just make the best of it and we'll make do with what we got. Um, I hope that everyone is doing well nonetheless, and we're just going to persist and keep on keeping on basically. So we're in for a better year. I know we are, but anyway, so I got this kind of cool idea for a video. I've been seeing a few others that have been doing this more or less in the vinyl community of YouTube and that sort of thing. And I thought that maybe I could chime in on it and put my little 2 cents in it. And so we're going to be doing a vinyl tag for 2021. I've never done anything like this before. I've done some stuff on like vinyl, like on my vinyl Instagram and stuff. By the way, I'll put the link down below if you want to follow that account because I post on there intermittently. Um, but anyway, so we're just gonna kind of just jump into it, and so there is 20 questions, and basically for each question you just show off like an album or whatever the case may be. For some of these, I pick CDs because I don't have them on vinyl yet, but I will. And some of the questions, they even require you to kind of like um, sort of make that there's one of that like an album you want to find, and of course obviously I don't have that. So first of all, I kind of wanted to diversify this a little bit. I didn't want this to make like one artist or two artists or like make multiple releases of an artist like this one here. So I only picked one of hers, thankfully. So, but I kind of wanted to just diversify this a little bit and kind of make this a sort of like a way of y'all getting to know my taste in music, I guess. Because this is sort of indicative of my taste in a nutshell, based off of the stuff that I've picked here for the vinyl tag. So we'll go ahead and just get started. So, new discovery for 2020. I chose this album, Broken English by Marianne Faithfull. This is Marianne Faithfull's album from 1979. So Marianne Faithfull, she was kind of a pop singer that came up in the 60s. She wasn't really like super famous. She had more success in like the UK than she did in America, but she was kind of she ran around with the Rolling Stones a lot, and I'm trying to think of which Stone she dated. I think it might have been Mick. I don't know, but I know she dated one of them. But she suffered a lot of issues throughout her 20s and 30s. She suffered huge drug addiction. This album actually came out several years after she released a previous album. I think it may have been like 4 or 5 years, and she kind of went into this sort of country phase or whatever, and then she comes out with this crazy record. It's very new wavy. It's kind of got a little bit of a punk influence on it, a little bit of reggae on there too. It's very rock and roll, just very rock and roll. I think this, like, she never really delved into rock music until she got onto this record, and her voice had gotten much deeper because of her addiction to heroin and that sort of thing, and from her smoking and that sort of deal. In comparison to some of her 60s stuff, I don't really listen to any of her other stuff besides this album. I mean, this is just such a incredible album. It's so good. There's a couple of tracks on here that are written by her, I do believe, or at least she had a co-writing credit on. Broken English, Witch's Song, and she has a writing credit on Why'd You Do It. So this album is really cool. It's definitely an album of its time, of that sort of late 70s, early 80s sort of lull after disco had died, and things started to get a little bit rockier, and it was either you were going into a hard rock route or you were going into a soft rock route. There was sort of no in between at this point. Or you might have gone a little funky or something like that, but yeah, it's definitely a product of its time, but it's a very timeless album at the same time. And there's plenty of tracks on here that are just really good. I love the opening track. I think it's just such a powerful track. I love the Ballad of Lucy Jordan. I think that's one of my favorite tracks of all time, to be honest. And Why'd You Do It? I love the backstory behind this. So apparently, the guy that wrote this, he wanted to uh, give this track to Tina Turner, and it has some very very explicit lyrics to it. And Marianne was just kind of like, Tina is not gonna, she's not gonna sing this. I'll do it. So, but it's just a very kind of dirty album, uh, grisly album. I think it's just it's perfect for her voice and for what she had gone through in her life at the time, and just to kind of just put her all of her rage and anger and frustration into this record. I think it was so important for her self care, and yeah, it's just a really cool album. I'm glad I discovered it. I knew about this a long time ago, but I finally listened to it last year and I loved it. I thought it was great. So yeah, that's Broken English. I'm gonna put my hair down, y'all, because this hair tie, it ain't doing it, and we're just gonna let our hair hang down today. Okay. So next question is quarantine buy. I had quite a few quarantine buys, but I thought I'd pick this one. This is Lady Gaga's Chromatica album. I got this, I want to say probably in about August of last year, which was, right when COVID and all that was kind of dying down a little bit before it would like reach its peak again. But I got it at my local record shop, and I think it was one of the first times I had actually went to one of my favorite shops since COVID hit. So it was kind of nice to find this, and this album took me a while to get into. First of all, I hate that this doesn't have the album art to it. I think it might have been rushed or something like that, just so it wouldn't take forever to get released on vinyl. But it's whatever. I mean, it's better than not having it at all. But this is a good album. It's not one of my favorites from 2020, but I will say that it has a great flow, and it's definitely probably in my top 5 favorite tracks or favorite albums from 2020. Um, Alice is just absolutely incredible. Rain on Me, 911, Enigma, Replay, Babylon. Just a lot of really, really good tracks, and I'm really glad that Lady Gaga sort of went back to basics in a way and went sort of back to her dance pop roots. I feel like she's definitely in a much more comfortable place when she's kind of just, being carefree and dancey and that sort of thing. I like Joanne, and I liked that sort of phase in her career, and I think she done really well with it. But I just think that she fits right at home with the much dancier stuff. Okay, so the next album, LP to find in 2021. I really want to try to find this, and I hope to God that I find it. I really hope that I do. But here we go. This is, if the glare will actually show, Sinead O'Connor's The Lion and the Cobra. I recently came across this album. It's kind of the same thing as Broken English. Like, I knew about The Lion and the Cobra for the longest time. It just took me forever to get into, and I've always known about Sinead. I've known about the controversy of Sinead and the Pope and that sort of thing, and of course Nothing Compares to You, which is her most successful single. It's kind of a shame that her biggest hit of her career was one that she didn't even write. It's one that Prince wrote, and she's a singer-songwriter in her own right, and I think this is her best album so far. I mean, I just think that this is absolutely incredible. I've listened to her first 3 albums, and I just think that this is the best one in the bunch so far. I look forward to listening to Universal Mother and Faith and Courage, but I just absolutely adore The Lion and the Cobra. I mean, you hear just this sort of unbridled nature that I think she didn't quite have in her later albums, at least not on the next album. I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got sort of has this sort of subdued type of vibe to it. I would love to find that on vinyl too, but I just feel more partial to The Lion and the Cobra. I mean, like, Mandinka is a fantastic pop track, just fantastic. Late 80s college rock pop track, I love Jerusalem. I love Jackie. Never Get Old with the intro of Enya reciting a verse in the Bible, and I think it's in Gaelic or something like that, or Gaelic, however you pronounce that. And of course, the centerpiece of the album, Troy. I mean, that's just a very, very powerful track. And I hear artists like I hear Tori Amos all over that track. I mean, like I feel like that Sinead O'Connor was especially very influential on Tori. And if you know anything about Tori's life, and you know like what kind of stuff she was going throughout her life at the time that this album came out, I just know that she saw a lot of solace in this record. I know that she did. So Drink Before the Wars also. I mean, every track on this is so good, but I would love to find this on vinyl. I just found this CD just the other day. I was so excited to find it, but yeah, that's Line in the Cobra. So the next one is a box set, and I chose, I do have the Love As Many Faces box set from Joni on vinyl, and I'll show that off at a later time, but I figured that I would show something a little bit different. This is the box set for Lana Del Rey's Ultraviolence album, which I got back when the album first came out in 2014. I paid a little bit for this, but I was obsessed with this record and this era so much. I thought that it was just a great album, probably one of the best of the 2010s, to be quite frankly honest with you. I feel like she probably takes about 3 or 4 of those spots for me, just because a lot of her records are just so freaking good. And this came with the CD as well as the vinyl, and the vinyl, it comes with the bonus tracks, as you can see here, which is Black Beauty, Guns N' Roses, and Flor de Kilos, which kind of add a little bit to the album. I do like Flor de Kilos a little bit, not necessarily the narratives, which is basically about cocaine, but it's Lana Del Rey. I mean, you can't hold that against her. And then here is the picture disc, which it pretty much looks the same on both discs. It's a 2-disc set. And then finally we have the CD, which is really nice that it actually came with the CD. Not a lot of box sets come with the CD, and it also comes with the booklet in the inside. Just a really immaculate box set. I think they did a fabulous job with this box set. So the next one that I have is a concept album, and I kind of had a hard time deciding what I was going to pick for this for this question, but I felt like that this would be a great contender for a concept album. And I think that it's more or less the controversy that's behind this album that makes it so special and makes it into the concept that it's really meant to be. And so, with that said, I chose Madonna's Erotica album from 1992. One of my favorite albums of all time, to be completely honest. Ray of Light is my favorite Madonna album, has grown to become my favorite, one of my favorites of all time, probably top 5 favorite albums of all time, but Erotica's right up there with it. And this is the first Madonna album that I listened to when I was a teenager, and it was very formative with with me coming out of the closet and that sort of thing, and coming into myself. I feel like that this album in a lot of ways was instrumental in helping me kind of mature and grow up. And there was just a lot of mature themes in this album. And what I think is really cool about this album is that, there is these very, very sexual moments throughout this album. But I don't think that it's as raunchy and as grotesque as people think that it was. I think that people get it mixed up with the Sex Book, which is the companion coffee table book that Madonna released at the same time as Erotica, which had a lot of explicit photos in it, of her basically naked and, having orgies and doing some S&M stuff, But this album is actually a very, it's very heavy with its themes of sex, of course, but it's not to the point where it's just absolutely just grotesque, you know. And even moments where it kind of gets a little bit that way. It's in a way that's classy, I guess you could say, and I just think it's a fantastic record. I love the first side. The first four tracks are just absolutely incredible. Where Life Begins, Bad Girl, Thief of Hearts, Words, Rain, one of my favorite Madonna ballads. Why Is It So Hard? In This Life, which is a track that she wrote about a friend of hers that died from AIDS. And that's another thing that I really appreciate about this album is that, you know, it really capitalizes on safe sex, and that was a really important topic in the early 90s with AIDS and HIV getting worse than they were in the 80s by this point. And it's just a really, really special album, especially to the LGBT community in a lot of ways. And it's definitely a staple in any uh, pop music fans' vinyl collection for sure. So there's Erotica. Another one, let's see, this is number 6, album where the band changed direction. I chose Nico's The Marble Index. So if you know anything about Nico, Nico was she was an actress and a model, and she was one of Andy Warhol's cohorts, and he is the reason for her getting included with the Velvet Underground in 1967, and she sung some songs on the Banana album, as it's called a lot of times, but it's the Velvet Underground and Nico. And she sung a few tracks on there, like Femme Fatale and I'll Be Your Mirror and All Tomorrow's Parties, and there's some of the best tracks on that album. And after Chelsea, after the Velvet Underground and Nico came out, then she released Chelsea Girl, which what came out probably a few months after the Velvet Underground and Nico, and it was this very sort of flowery album. It's very, very 60s, and oddly enough, it's her most well-known album, which I think is really strange because it's obviously not the direction that she wanted to go into. In a lot of ways, I say that the Marble Index, which is the album that came out right after Chelsea Girl, I think this came out in 1968 or 69. I think it's 68. Is such a different vibe to to Chelsea Girl completely. Where Chelsea Girls has this very just beautiful melodic feel to it. This is the complete opposite. Complete opposite. It's very stark. It's very dark. It's very chilly, cold. It definitely kind of feels very gothic in a lot of ways. And this album is Nico is very instrumental in the formation of goth rock. And this is in a lot of ways a proto goth rock album if you think about it. But this is definitely not an album for everyone. I will say that. It's a quick album. It's only 30 minutes long, but it can get very dark and abysmal at times, and it can get kind of creepy at times. I do know Lawns of Dawns. That's definitely a very it's a very creepy track. But I love it. I love the like moments of despair and just anger and frustration on this album. It really puts you into her perspective and what was going through her mind at the time. I think Frozen Mornings is probably one of the saddest songs I've ever heard in my entire life. She wrote that song about when she was a little girl, growing up in, I think she grew up in Germany. I think she's German. Nico sounds German. But anyway, so when she was growing up in Germany, obviously she was growing up during the Holocaust, World War II, that sort of thing. And when she was a little girl, she passed, this train passed by her, and there was people inside of the train. And, you know, her being so small and innocent, she didn't know any better, and she just, you know, waved at them and smiled at them. And years later, she realized that those were actually Jews being taken to concentration camps. Strange track, but it's very fascinating, and it's just a very, very sad, very dismal track. It's definitely not one that I listen to all the time. The Marble Index or Desert Shore. I like her next album, Desert Shore, but when I do listen to them, I enjoy listening to them a lot. So the next one is a white label promo. I think this might count as a white label promo. I mean, it's a white label, but this is a 12-inch single that I own of Gimme More by Britney Spears. I found this for $3 several years ago. This was before Britney had all of her albums out on vinyl, and so this was kind of exciting to find because, it was really hard to even find Britney songs on vinyl at all. So, but I still kind of enjoy the fact that I own this, and it's just kind of a reminder of how far we've come with Britney's albums finally getting released on vinyl and getting released in different iterations, which is really cool. I mean, there was once a time when you couldn't even find a Britney album on vinyl, period. Okay, so number 8 is a compilation, and I chose Donovan's Greatest Hits from 1969, I believe. I believe it's 1969. This is probably one of my favorite Greatest Hits compilations, and Donovan's he's definitely one of those types of artists that has fantastic singles, but some of the album tracks are kind of eh. So this is a really fantastic compilation. I absolutely adore it, and that not to say that he doesn't have any good albums. He does. I actually like his album, Gift from a Flower to a Garden. I think that's a really pretty album, but we might have to cover that up because parts. You got all kinds of pictures in here. It's also just a really cool set too. I really like this a lot. And then there's the album. Some of my favorite tracks on here. I love Lelania. I think that's a beautiful track and one of the best examples of Baroque pop of the era. Of course, we can't talk about Donovan without talking about like Season of the Witch and Sunshine Superman and Mellow Yellow, Hurdy Gurdy Man. I mean, those are just they're legendary. But I especially love I love Sunshine Superman. I love Hurdy Gurdy Man. Where You Love Like Heaven, Jennifer Juniper. I love, and I hate that these versions are not on Spotify because this album is on Spotify, but it actually has these two tracks here, Colors and Catch the Wind. These are some earlier singles that he released in his earlier albums. And for this album, they didn't have the rights to those original tracks, and thus they used a re-recorded version of it. Like, he basically re-recorded Colors and Catch the Wind for the Greatest Hits package. And I love those versions so much better than I do the just kind of folky acoustic versions in a lot of ways. I do like Colors, but Catch the Wind is okay. But I think this version of Catch the Wind is so pretty. I love it. But, and Colors too. It's just, it's great. Next one is an album that tells a story. So I chose this one. I feel like that this is just a standard for me to pick this one. Shania Twain's Come On Over. I was so excited when I found out that Shania Twain was releasing her albums on vinyl because Shania is probably the first pop icon that I can remember that I absolutely enjoyed as a child. This album came out in 1997. I was 3 years old at the time, and I distinctly remember my mother. We went to Circuit City and bought the CD, and that's a very formative memory of mine that I can remember. And I just remember the excitement of going and buying the CD and listening to it with my mom, and my mom putting it on a cassette tape for me and let me listen to it on my Walkman and all that when I was little. And it's just this album is I'm very nostalgic for this record, and I come back to it every once or twice a year, maybe, or 3 times a year. It's just a great country pop album, and I honestly wholeheartedly believe that this is a pop record disguised as a country album. It sometimes kind of borders on pop rock in a lot of ways, but the international version definitely proves that a little bit more, that this is definitely a pop record, more than anything, and it's the reason why it was so successful. Um, but I just think this is an incredible album, one of the best of the '90s for sure. I definitely love "Man, I Feel Like a Woman." There's a home video of me singing that song. um, Love Gets Me Every Time. Don't Be Stupid. You know I love you from this moment on. Whatever you do, don't. If you want to touch her, ask. A lot of feminist themes on here too, which I think are really cool. So, Black Eyes and Blue Tears. I Won't Leave You Lonely. There's just a lot of really good tracks on here, and it's so many hits, so many. I mean, this feels like the like Tapestry by Carole King. You know, like it's just an album that has back to back hits on it. So, album that needs a vinyl pressing. I know Shannon said Night Ride Home, and I absolutely do agree with her that Night Ride Home does need a reissue. I do have that album, but it's a little bit busted up. But I'm glad to have it on vinyl. I'm very lucky to have it on vinyl. But I definitely also want to have this one, Turbulent Indigo by Joni Mitchell. I know I mentioned this in my Joni Mitchell ranking video, so I'm not going to go into too great detail about this album, but I think it's one of Joni's best albums. It's an incredible album, and it's got so many great themes on it, and just sort of blends in where Joni was at in the 90s and blending it together with some of the things that made her so special in the 70s. And I especially, of course, like I said in my previous video, I love the Magdalene Laundries and How Do You Stop and Not to Blame. There's just so many great moments on this album, and I need it on vinyl so bad. I once read this rumor that apparently in 1994, Warner was going to release this album, and they actually put out a pre-order and everything in 1994 for it. And this was only in Europe, I think. But they canceled it because obviously vinyl wasn't a big seller in 1994, so they just scrapped it completely, and it's so unfortunate. But I do hope that in the very near future that this album gets reissued. We saw Shine get reissued. Maybe we might see her 90s albums get reissued. I really want all of her 90s albums, to be quite frankly honest, including Taming the Tiger. I find a lot of redeeming qualities in Taming. So, Turbulent Indigo, that's one that I want on vinyl so bad. Okay, so the next one is a common album and an uncommon album. So for this one, I chose, for the common album, I think this one might be pretty common, at least in a lot of people's record collections these days, is Back to Black by Amy Winehouse. A modern classic, and absolutely adore it. Amy was an incredible talent. And then uncommon album, I chose this this sort of novelty album that I found a couple of years ago that I was so excited to find, and that is the Young and the Restless original theme and TV soundtrack music. This is an album that came out, I believe, in 1974, which is probably about a year or so after this show came on. I think they premiered in 1973. And as you can see here, there's some really cool pictures of some of the original cast members of the show. So, I picked up this album. I've known about this album for many years. I grew up watching The Young and the Restless with my family, my mom, my grandma, my other grandma, like both my grandmas, my aunts, even my grandpas watched it, but virtually most of my family, if not all of them, watched The Young and the Restless and all the other CBS soap operas when I was a kid. And so this album is kind of special to me because I do remember some of these songs being played on the show back in the 90s, and even though that a lot of these tracks were recorded in the 70s and they have a very 70s vibe to it in a lot of ways, but it's just a really cool little relic, and it makes for a great conversation piece. It's just one of those records that, not everyone cares for, but it's kind of cool to have, and it's kind of funny to have, just like a record of soap opera music, and it's very dramatic, as you would expect. So I think it's just a really cool album. Let me show you a little bit of a close up of that because it's really really cool. I always loved back in the day that they always had the drawings of all the cast members on the opening sequence for the show. Thought that was kind of a cool little touch. Okay, so the next one is EP. I chose FKA Twigs Melissa EP. This EP came out in 2015. It's a really really good one. I love FKA Twigs. A lot of this like some of this like alternative stuff of today, it's kind of hit or miss for me sometimes. But I especially love FKA Twigs. I think she's really cool, and she's a very unique talent, very very unique, and she's definitely ahead of the curve in a lot of ways as far as like some of the other artists that are out right now. I definitely look forward to hearing what else she has out in store. But this is Melissa. Show you the back. Okay, and then the next one is girl group. I chose TLC's Crazy Sexy Cool from 1994. I grew up listening to TLC a lot as a kid. My cousin loves TLC, and so this album is kind of cool to have. I loved this album when I was a teenager. I used to bump it all the time as a teen, and I had to get it on vinyl when I found out that it was getting reissued on vinyl. Really cool. It's a great album. It's probably their best record that they released. The next one is an album cover that you love. I think this one is a very obvious choice in a lot of ways, and I absolutely adore this album cover so much, and that is the Hounds of Love album cover by Kate Bush. This is just absolutely legendary, and I think Kate Bush is probably one of the few artists that I can think of that virtually all of her album covers correlate with each of her the vibes of her albums and the themes of each album. But this one is especially really special. I mean, this picture is pretty much indicative of the ninth wave over here, and then here's these pictures. I just love the pictures of her with the dogs. I think it's so cool. And then here's our little colored vinyl. This is an original press from 1985, which I absolutely enjoy and adore. So I'm so happy that I have this. So the next one is an album that I've listened to the most. I based this off of my LastFM. I blame the interludes for this being the most listened to album, but it is a fantastic record, and I love it. But I'll just go ahead and show it to y'all. Janet Jackson's Janet from 1993. My poster back here. This is I love this record. I remember when I first listened to this album, I just played it over and over and over and over again. And I think that might be why my LastFM shows it being like 1,500 plays or something like that, because this album has like 27 tracks on it, most of which are interludes. That's the thing with Janet's albums, is that they often come with a lot of interludes, but this one is overloaded with them. But it's still good nonetheless. I love it. That's the Way Love Goes, You Want This, If, Throb, Funky Big Band, Because of Love, again, Where Are You Now, The Body That Loves You, Anytime, Anyplace. I mean, there's just so many good tracks on this. This is also an original pressing of this album, but I really want to try to get the new reissue that came out recently, because this album is scratched on New Agenda. It doesn't really play that well on New Agenda. I haven't really it's not really a major factor for me, because New Agenda is actually probably one of my least favorite tracks off this album, not necessarily because of the themes itself. It's just kind of a chaotic track with the instrumental, and it can be very very just very distracting. A lot of the beats and drum samples and stuff that they used on New Agenda, I can't really pay attention to what they're trying to say in the song, so it's not really that big of a deal that it's scratched to me, but I would love to have the reissue nonetheless. Okay, so the next one is an album that you had to get an OG copy of, and I kind of didn't really have a choice, um, especially with a lot of her albums. But I just I love that I have this, and it is from the Choir Girl Hotel by Tori Amos. This is an original press from 1998 from England. Um, this is the 1 LP version, not the 2. But I still love it. It's one of my favorite Tori albums. Little Earthquakes will always be my fave, but I adore all of her 90s albums. I think they all have their own unique sensibilities, their own vibe. This is especially one that I feel is really special, and it's definitely one that I think it's probably this one and Little Earthquakes are probably the two that she put the most grit and soul into in the 90s. It's just a really good album. Fantastic record. So the next one is Last Album You Purchase. I kind of went hard this weekend, but I'll show off one of them that I got. The Lion and the Cobra one was one of the CDs I bought this weekend, but I'll show this one off because I think it's really cool. This is the Carpenters, the singles 1969 to 1973 in quadraphonic. I haven't listened to it yet, so I'm really excited to listen to it. If you know me, you know I love quadraphonic versions of albums, and I always try to get them at any chance that I get. Not only do I love that I own this, but I also am so glad that it came with the booklet, which I don't have with my other copy of this album. So it's really cool to have, and it just has like some little blurbs and stuff about each track and the lyrics and all that. It's just really cool. And then we have, for the next one, album they don't get. And I assume that this is albums that got some not so great reviews from people and from critics and that sort of thing. So I picked a very obvious choice, and that would be Bjork's Utopia album from 2017. This is her last record that she released so far as of making this video. I don't know what it is about people that like they say that they don't enjoy this record, or they think it's Bjork's worst album. I don't see it personally. I think that this is one of her best, honestly. I mean, sure, it is a little conflated, and it's her longest album she's ever released. I get that, but at the same time, like, I think that it's just I think it's a great album, and I think Arca and Bjork are a match made in heaven, personally, and I just love how pretty and how this album alludes to nature a lot. I just think it's a really, really fantastic album. I love Blissing Me and The Gate, Body Memory, Loss, Courtship, Tabula Rasa, Claim Taker, Feature Creatures, and Future Forever. It starts out so well and ends so well, and the middle just kind of, it just jumps from different ebbs and flows, and it just blends in and flows so perfectly. I just don't quite understand why people just don't like it. I guess maybe it's just because it's just too long of an album, or maybe they're just not used to Bjork having, flutes and stuff in her music, and they just don't really vibe with that. That's on them, I guess. But I personally love Utopia. I think it's a great record, and I think maybe more people just need to kind of let it grow on them a little bit more. Maybe give it a re-listen at some point. So if you're one of those people, give it another listen. See if you like it. I mean, if you don't, it's fine, but I think it's a good album. So this was a gift, by the way, from my friend Daniel. He got this for me at his job. He works at one of the used bookstores that I frequent a lot, and he always finds some really cool stuff. So shout out to him if he's watching this. Punk album, or your closest thing to it. I have to pick this one because I've been so obsessed with this record as of late, because I just recently listened to it, and yet again, this is another one of those albums that I've known about for many, many years and just never got around to listening to it. Horses by Patti Smith. This is her debut from 1975. I'm kind of like, I've been listening to this for the past couple weeks, and I hear a lot of punk influence on this, or a lot of punk elements, because obviously this album came out before punk really took off. But I do think that it's very artsy in comparison to a lot of other punk records that have been released, especially during this era, like in the mid to late 70s. Where a lot of punk bands and punk artists, they tended to kind of stick with a sort of formula of verse, chorus, verse, three chords, whatever, and just these like really simple pop tracks. Patty was kind of different and kind of expanded on it a little bit and implemented her poetry into it, which is really cool. One of my favorite examples of such is Birdland, which is a 9-minute long track. It's the second to only to Land, by being the two tracks that are the longest on this album, and they're both about 9.5 minutes, give or take. But Birdland is really, I mean, it just builds and builds and builds, and it starts out really quiet and then gets really loud, and then kind of like tones down a little bit towards the end. And it's basically about this track about this boy who loses his father, and he kind of comes to this realization that he's by himself, and that his father's gone, and that he can't talk to him anymore or spend time with him. And it's just a very very special track to me. I really think it's absolutely gorgeous, and of course Gloria's pretty pretty cool. I love Redondo Beach. It's just, what's crazy about some of these songs is that they sound like they're these like very carefree, like hell yeah, like we're having a good time and this sort of thing. But you got to listen to these lyrics, and then you're just like, oh, okay. Redondo Beach is one of those tracks because it just sounds kind of like this sort of jubilant, like reggae song or whatever, and it's got this really cool melody to it. But it's really about this girl who committed suicide, and they find her body in the ocean. And he's just like, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, this is a really cool track. But then I listened to the lyrics, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. But it's just a really, really great album. I love Horses. I can't wait to find this on vinyl. I will have to try to see if I can scout out an original pressing of this. Hopefully I can find it. I know I probably will someday, but yeah, so there's Horses. And then finally, favorite 2020 reissue. So this, I think it's my favorite because I love this record so much, and it's one of my favorites. But I'm not so pleased with the packaging of this album, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So we're going with Fiona Apple's "Win the Pawn." This is the very first release of it on vinyl. It was released in 1999, was never released on vinyl. Fiona, I agree with her, or I understand where she was coming from by not putting the picture of her on the front cover, because her ex-boyfriend was the one that took the pictures of her, and he was kind of a pile of garbage to her. I can understand that sentiment, but it's kind of like, I have a lot of complaints about this album cover, like a lot of people do. I mean, first of all, it's just very underwhelming, and second of all, I don't understand why she couldn't have put the entire poem all on this, just like the original album cover did. Because if you take a look here, you get the whole poem right along here. She could have just done that and just used that, and then here's the other side of it. Nonetheless, I love that I have it on vinyl, and it's just really exciting that I finally do have it on vinyl, because it's one of Fiona's best. I think it might be her best. Alrighty, guys. Well, I think that completes our vinyl tag. Sorry if this might have been a little bit long. You know me. I love to talk, but anyways, tune in at some point. Hopefully, sometime next week or so, I'll come out with another video. Leave me some ideas down below in the comments. I would greatly appreciate it, because sometimes I'm at a loss of what I should post on here. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.